Hey guys, Jackie with Famished Farm. How are you doing? We got out into the garden today again. We finalized where all of our straw bales are going to go. We had 2 extra straw bales that there wasn't quite enough room between the run of straw bales and my existing blueberry plants, so I figured out what to do with those. So we start the conditioning process on those straw bales. I also plant some different lettuces, which in my case we do salads at lunchtime, and so I do baby greens, and I had 2 different lettuce mixes. They looked very similar seed-wise, but from 2 different companies. And I was going to do kale, but I was out of kale seeds, so I did Swiss chard and the sorrel. The sorrel I was going to put in the garden, on the end of the garden that doesn't get very much sun, but we had room to put it out here, so those got put out. And also we have a new soaker hose for the straw bales, and I wanted to get that stretched out. We're going to have some weather in the 70s coming up, or near 70. So, and when it's warmer, those are easier to stretch out and get into a straighter, they're just easier to lay out in your garden when they're flat instead of, So, and then the other thing we did, I put out my rain gauge, and I almost put out my hummingbird feeders and my bird baths, but it might just be, I've got time to do that. We've got plenty of time. Actually, we've got plenty of time, because really my first plant date should not be till the end of the month. Anyway, we had middle of the month we had windstorms, and so I know there were limbs on the ground out front in the front yard, so I grabbed those and put those on the burn pile, or not the burn pile, the fire pit, which is generally where those get dragged. And at some point, usually when it gets annoyingly high, I will pull our little chipper. We've got an 1.5 inch, one of those Harbor Freight inexpensive, $130 chippers. And I will chip those, and then that becomes our mulch for primarily our beds out. We've got 2 very large beds at the front of the house that are still recovering from the previous owners. That guy had a bad back, and so the last several years everything was overgrown, and we've pretty much got them back into at least delineated and mulched, so the weed pressure is better, and we're still figuring out what to plant. Good cloudy morning. So I've grabbed my soaker hose, the new one that needs to be uncoiled, and my bag of fertilizer to get started on conditioning the bales. But first we have to get our water hooked up from the outside spigot on the back of the house. And this is the hose that I run across the driveway. And so we'll get that set up with the 4-way divider that we use. And I don't need this 4-way divider, diverter, whatever. It's just what I have. I've had it since we lived in Illinois. I bought it in Menards up there. It's got a lifetime warranty, which is good and bad because I need to replace it this year. It's developed a crack, which if I remember to show you, I'll point that out later. But I will have to make use of that lifetime warranty when we're up in Illinois in September, if I remember. I put a little penetrating oil on the threads, and I've remembered to grab my rain barrel gauge, or my rain gauge sitting there to the right. And so we'll walk out and get that rain gauge set up also. And this is staked in at the point where I've got a immature crepe myrtle, and there's a more mature one over to the right with the 2 white geese sitting in front of it. But this is where we've set up our rain barrel, our rain gauge for the 2 years we've been here, and it's nice. It's a big one, so we can see not exactly how much is in it, but a pretty good view from the carport. And I do make note in my calendar every time we get rain and be sure to dump it. So now I'm carrying out the coiled new soaker hose and my bag of fertilizer out to the straw bales, and I do remember that I need cardboard for the bales, the 2 final bales that will be moving into their final resting spot. So I have to go back in, get that, and these are the bales coming up that I'm going to be moving. And I decide to put them, they're kind of between the fence and the blueberry bushes, and I'm trying to create a place that I won't step on these immature blueberries. And unfortunately, we don't know if this is going to work, but I decide that I better push the bales back to the fence, and that will create a little more room between the blueberries and the bales of straw. So, and then I decide to kind of delineate those 2 blueberries with those bricks, which hopefully will keep me from running into them. And I will look for something different to do also at the home improvement store. Here I'm taking off the T-post that I just had setting on top of the bales, and we'll get started with the conditioning. So here's the book that I've used last summer. So I used last year the traditional fertilizer method. So this is just big box store lawn fertilizer. In my case, I use a 1/2 cup of the dry fertilizer for the 12 days of conditioning. So day 1 is 1/2 cup of fertilizer, and then water it into saturation. If you're using his organic method, you would use 3 cups of a combination of whatever organic fertilizers you use, dry fertilizers, Milorganite, bone meal, whatever. And so that's what I've done, is spread this 1/2 cup per bale. And now I'm trying to finish getting the hose pulled over to the garden itself, and having a little trouble locating the ends. So it takes a few minutes, as things happen to do when you're gardening. And this hose, last year we just left it kind of embedded in the grass. This, which my husband assured me would be fine, until it wasn't. He did hit it with the lawnmower at one point and had to cut out a section. The hose is plenty long enough, so that was fine, but I hate when that happens, because then you've always got a leak. So this year I'm going to dig a small trench to bury that hose, and then that will probably live in the trench. And just we'll use an air compressor to blow it out. So finally, get the water pressure set about right. And they do recommend using something with more spray than this fan sprayer I'm using. Unfortunately, Rod's got my higher pressure hose end on the car wash hose sprayer thing that he's got set up. So I just take my time, and it takes several minutes per bale. You're saturating this, and this is obviously kind of time lapse, but you're really trying to force that fertilizer down into the bale. And you want to do that until the water runs out of the bottom of the bale. So each bale takes several minutes, and I get all 6 bales done in this section, and then I will move over to the other 2 bales up against the fence that we just put in place. So the first, basically all the days, you're just alternating fertilizing one day and watering, and then the next day you water in. And so that's kind of the process for the 12 days of conditioning the bales. So it happened that last night, I'm recording this the day after we did get a nice soaking rain, so I'm not even going to worry about watering the bales today. I will re-add fertilizer on day 3 tomorrow. And while I'm here, I give the strawberries, the blueberries, and these poor neglected cabbages a good soak while I'm there. And now we get this new hose unfurled so it can start softening up in the sun. If you guys have any suggestions for how to make hoses lay flat sooner than letting them soak in the sun for a couple days, let me know. I would appreciate it. And I've kind of just reminded myself I need to come up with some landscape staples. I think I have some heavy duty enough wire that I can just cut my own, but I need to get that done within the next 12 days to get the soaker hoses onto the bales before they're actually planted. And then we move over to our first raised bed. We're going to put in our carrots here. But as I've talked about before, my compost has lots of little twigs in it yet. So I'm going to take a few minutes and get the top of this planting bed as smooth as I can. I'm putting in, I think it's called Chantenay carrots, which is a good storage carrot. And unfortunately, I wish I had planted about half of the carrots that I end up putting in right now. I kind of forget, I just want to plant everything. Well, I would have rather done a little more of a succession planting, but so be it. I was aiming for 1 or 2 seeds per little hole. After I get that all planted, then I water it in with my watering can. Next up is our lettuce area. These are the containers we refilled the soil and reconditioned it the other day. We're going to work on kale, the Michigan Gardener salad bowl mix, sorrel from Michigan Gardener. This is last year's lettuce mix I used, and some Swiss chard from last year. And the soil must be great because there's already little weedy things popping up in the mix. So I do take a couple minutes and do all 4 of these containers before I start planting. And this is the Michigan Gardener salad mix, which looked very similar to the Seeds of Change salad mix that I put in the next container. And as I discover the kale seeds are empty, so I decide to go ahead and put in the Swiss chard, I think in this 3rd container. And then in the last container, I put in the sorrel. And after finally covering all the lettuces, we water them in with a different watering can. Then we moved over to the front yard. Right in the center of the picture is a sugar maple. There's a smaller one behind it. Both of those shed lots of branches. And then kind of to the right of that is a pecan. And I noticed we did not get out and pick up nuts this fall, which we should have, because there's tons of pecans, which I'm sure the squirrels have been enjoying. Over on the side of the yard, there's another sugar maple and a crab apple that I also pick up some branches. And here's our fire pit that you can't see because it's covered with branches that are mostly ready to be chipped. So anyway, we got a little accomplished today. It didn't take long out there, but it feels good to be back working in the yard, in the garden. So stay tuned. There's of course going to be more coming up, and we'll get you updated on the seedlings, one of these in the next week or so. So thanks for being here. Thanks for watching.